Welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show, and we have in studio with us this morning WPC Esmerald Corbin of the TTPS of the Special Victims Department, and she's here to talk about the 16 days of activism. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Hull, and thank you for having me on Tobago Updates, and good morning to Tobago. It's a pleasure being here.
So tell us, firstly, before we get into 16 days of activism, what is this Special Victims Department about?
Okay, the Special Victims Department is three different departments coming together. Previously, we had the Child Protection Unit, the Gender-Based Violence Unit, and the Sexual Offences Unit. And the Tobago Police Service thought it best to amalgamate these three units because we all deal with special victims. And so we have been trained to act and to investigate reports against women, children, and men who find themselves as victims of abuse.
Okay, and now that we have that out of the way, the 16 days of activism, just inform the public what the 16 days of activism is about.
Okay, Tobago as a nation would have signed on to some ratification with the United Nations, and the United Nations celebrates that 16 days of activism against domestic violence and gender-based violence. It started from November 25th and it ends on December 10th this year. It's a global and international campaign against, and where NGOs, CBOs, faith-based organizations come together in a collaborative initiative to bring heightened awareness about the impact. This year, we are focusing on digital violence and what that means for people in general.
All right. So, in terms of the 16 days of activism, talk to us about the state of Tobago when it comes to the issue of domestic violence. Is it something that keeps, or just abuse in general, whether it's abuse of children, domestic violence, is it something that is very prevalent on the island, unfortunately? Is it something that you're seeing it's growing in prevalence? Speak to us.
Unfortunately, yes, it is growing into Tobago. We would have seen a vast increase during the COVID-19 period when persons were at home and families were literally bursting at the seams because some persons could not be in that environment for too long. And sad to say, they resort to some type of abuse. Children, we saw an increase in sexual penetration and sexual touching with children. We also saw an increase of assault. And mind you, some of these offenses fall under the various acts. We have the Domestic Violence Act, we have the Sexual Offences Act, and we have the Offences Against the Persons Act and the Children's Act. So there are various offenses under these pieces of legislation that persons found themselves in contravention of.
I know, I want to speak to the statistics when it comes to closing these matters and seeing them all the way down to the end, because historically you would hear in our communities, in our spaces, where an alleged offender would be charged, and then you hear someone say, well, the case get thrown out, or this one didn't come court, or you even would have heard of monies being paid and this one ain't go court, and then you just have these victims by the wayside. Are there any stats currently on the closing of these cases?
Well, I don't have any statistical data on me presently, but what I can share with you, previously matters used to go to the magistrate's court, but now with AJIPA, that's a new piece of legislation, matters go directly to the High Court, where they are dealt with expeditiously. So where a matter would have taken years in the magistrate's court, it's a matter of days in the High Court. The matter goes before we have a hearing, a sufficiency hearing, and after that sufficiency, they determine if there's enough evidence for the matter to go towards trial, and we get early trial dates. In the magistrate court previously, you will have the person being charged, let's say in September, and every 2 months or so the matter comes up until they can accommodate it at trial. But now, with the advent of the AJIPA, we find that a person can be arrested today, taken before the court tomorrow, and the matter starts almost immediately. So victims now get a sense of relief. And then they are not, in the magistrate court, they used to have to come and give that evidence viva voce. But now, with the High Court, we have paper committal, where the victim is not put through that traumatic event, but merely there is questioning to clarify what the investigations would have unearthed.
Right. I was now about to ask how the victims deal with, going through that trauma constantly, being cross-examined and that kind of thing. But you would have just brought that up, addressed it. So I want to talk about the activism and how it connects with NGOs, because I know that your unit would have recently worked alongside Children's Authority as well as another ICANN, as well as ICANN, up to, I believe it was last week.
Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We were in 3 different communities, the Bell Garden, we went to Moriah, and we also went to Buku.
Yes.
In that workshop, we would have met people one-on-one and had a round table discussion. ICANN did a dramatic presentation, a real-life scenario, and then we would have sat around the table and discussed with the persons present the impact that gender-based violence and domestic violence has on them, and we would have come up as a team with solutions from the persons on the ground. What do they see as some of the solutions going forward? And this forms also part of the 16 days of activism. Okay,
so the ICANN, Children's Authority workshop with ICANN and your department was part of the 16 days. So the 16 days, they've already begun. So we have about 13 more days left.
Yes, and we have an initiative coming up on Friday. We'll be here at the Port Mall. The entire unit will be at the Port Mall. We'll be at 3 different locations. We have chosen 2 schools to go to this year, which will be Roxville Secondary and Mason Hall Secondary. We'll be having symposiums to chat with students between forms 1 and 3, along with their parents and teachers, and any other persons within that community can join us as we talk about gender-based violence and domestic violence, particularly in the schools, how it impacts children, what correlation that has with children when they act out. Is it something that we can discuss? How do we go from there? How do we assist? How do we assist those children in treating with traumatic things that happen to them? So we will be there between 10 and 12 on Friday in the schools, and right at the Port Mall between 10 and 2 p.m. You can come down to Tobago, meet our well-trained staff. We are open for that discussion. We are open to show you the impact of that particular topic on you and what you can do as the public, how you can bring awareness and how you can report. We always say, if you see something, say something.
Right. I have, so as you touched on the children and you touched on teenagers, I want to touch a bit on teenage pregnancy, because it's a crime, one, and I from my point of view, from what I see, I'm seeing a prevalence as well. But my question is, a young girl is 15 and she's pregnant. What is the procedure? Is it that she goes to the health center, which she must do, and is it that the nurses there are to make a report? Because to me, I see young girls with babies and adult fathers in their 30s walking about freely, and I'm confused on a daily basis.
Well, there is mandatory reporting as it relates to sexual abuse against children. And so, from the time a child is found to be pregnant, the onus is on the parent to make a report. If they don't, and they seek, if they go to any health center, any hospital, the doctor picks up that phone before doing anything with that child and contacts us to let us know. Once we get the report, when we get that report, we immediately action that report. We go to the health center, or in some cases, the parent brings the child to us, and we take a report and we take a statement from the child, and the investigation begins from there. You must note that the law says a person is innocent until proven guilty. And as such, perpetrators who go before the court of law are afforded the ability to be put on bail, with, of course, restrictions of not communicating with the victim and all of that. But we advocate and we work very hard to ensure that these persons would pay literally for their crimes. Recently, I had a matter where the person was convicted. Yes, it took 10 years, but that person was convicted, and the victim was relieved that after 10 years, and as I said, that started off in the magistrate's court, hence the reason why it took so long. But I have matters now that are currently at trial level at the High Court.
So there is policy.
Yes.
But is there implementation? Because in our communities, I'm not very certain how we see implementation. So kudos that there is policy, but what could be done for the implementation? There is a crack because we have a high number of adult men that should be charged or behind bars for teenage pregnancy, and we're not seeing that.
Okay, well, one of the pilot projects we would have done at the Special Victims Department is the school intervention team, which went out to all schools in Tobago from right up to tertiary level school. And we had conversation with men particularly, because we recognize a lot of men don't know the law. For them, previously, it stated from 16, they could have engaged in certain acts with children from the age of 16, but the law has changed, and persons are shocked when they hear you cannot engage in you can't even have a sexual conversation, because now that's against the law, with any child under the age of 18. So we have been doing the sensitization of that, and we have seen some decrease in men engaging. However, every law has a challenge. And where you may be speaking about adults, we have a situation with children engaging in sexual acts with children. So in some of the cases of teenage pregnancy, they are pregnant for somebody who is 2 years or 2 years.
And that falls under the Romeo and Juliet Act.
Romeo and Juliet clause.
Right.
And so we have a challenge in that gray area, which of course we have shared with lawmakers as to how this presents a challenge for us. So it's not always an adult that is responsible for teenage pregnancy. In some cases, it is another child.
But I want to, right before, as we are on this very sensitive part, I would have also come across, and even would have affected my family many years ago, more than 25 years ago, where a mentally challenged individual, and when I say mentally challenged, Down syndrome, and I would have even seen someone that I know recently, and she has 3 boys, and I know that she possessed the mental capacity of like a 12-year-old. What do we have in place? Because it does not matter to me, correct me if I'm wrong, if she's 25. She has the mental capacity of, I remember her going to Happy Haven as well, of a 12-year-old child or a 10-year-old child, and she has 3 boys. And I'm seeing these things so prevalent. I'm saying to myself, she could be 35, she's a child. Do we have laws in place to protect these persons? Because who in the world would have impregnated this child?
Yes, we have laws under the Children's Act that speaks to somebody that does not have the mental capacity of an adult. Of course, we will have to have the evidence to support that. But bearing in mind, we need to have what we call a victim. And a victim is someone who knows that they're a victim, one, and the process requires a statement from that person, because you need a statement to go before the court. And sometimes there's a challenge where that is concerned in capturing that statement from the person, because whereas a family member may say, well, she is a child and has a capacity, the victim comes in and says, no, I am an adult and I conscientiously made that decision.
So that's where we have psychotherapists to do an analysis. And does the TTPS have a department for that and have someone there? Because even if this person comes in and say, I'm an adult, you could, I mean, sometimes just your interaction with that person, you could tell that they are not. Is it that now the onus is on the TTPS to now put this person before a psychiatrist to be evaluated, or whatever board there is in place to be evaluated?
Well, currently the law only allows us to, for children under a particular age to be assessed, and not necessarily somebody who legally is an adult.
So I think
there are certain things that we have constraints within.
I think that's one of the challenges that my co-host is having, in that there is it's basically like statutory rape of the teenager. But very often what happens in these cases where she's seeing these men with these teenage girls in public is that regardless of whether we know it's a crime or not, the victim needs to make a report.
Yes.
And if the victim isn't making a report, then these people are free to walk about and do as they please. And I think that's the challenge that we're having a lot in our society, is that very often the victims don't believe they're victims, or sometimes the victims, even though it's statutory rape, they were willing participants in the relationship, and therefore they don't see the need to make a report. Very often as well, we see where families might be in dire straits in terms of economy and socio-economically.
They're very vulnerable.
And they're very vulnerable. And even though they may not be 100% satisfied with this man coming in and interfering with their daughter, they see the financial benefits of having him around, and as such, many times they tend to bite the teeth and just go along with it.
And that's why we encourage the public, the general public, that whereas we may have a parent or a guardian encouraging that behavior, that child or parent don't live in silo, they live in a community. They live in an area where somebody may know about that, but fails to report it. One may question, if I report this, what can happen to me? Good news, you can report it anonymously. You don't even have to call it TTPS. You can call 996, which is the Children's Authority. You can call 211. These are numbers that you can call. And how do you remain anonymous? You just don't give them your name or anything. You just call with the information. And once that information is shared, we are contacted at the Special Victims Department, and we act on every report we get. Teachers have been making these reports through that, because we had the Evelyn James, with that anonymous reporting, we have been getting results from it. So again, if you see something, say something, because domestic violence, gender-based violence, abuse against children is everybody's business. It's not just the TTPS. How can we solve crime if people stay silent? People need to come on board, recognize that it is wrong on all accord, because the traumatic impact that it has on these children will become adults. That generation is coming up to take over our society. So it's important that we all see the need to act. And hence the reason for this 16 days of activism, to heighten people's awareness and let them know, listen to me, we are there to assist.
I want to touch on something that has been a quote-unquote secret shame of Tobago for quite some time, which is the issue of incest. In your experience, in your department's experience, have you seen like a decrease in instances of incest, an increase, or has nothing changed over the years?
We have seen a decrease because through the school intervention team, we empower children. Whereas people use abuse to silence victims, we gave them a voice through that initiative. where they came to us, even walking on the street, persons will say, officer, officer, they feel comfortable coming and sharing what happened. They weren't comfortable with the teachers or the school social workers or so, but when we came in, they became comfortable to be able to talk. We had a segment where one particular school had a box where they created, and they asked children to write in there anything that impacted them. And that gave us an avenue to have topics. How do we address it? In what form of fashion will we do it? Because previously we talked at children, but now we have conversation with them. So when we go into the room, it's not just the officer talking, but it's, okay, tell me, why are you all engaging in these activities? So you have to find out from them what's happening with them. And when we find out, we go to the root cause of the problem, then we are able to assist them.
So you spoke about, before, just to wrap up, you spoke about the activism from last week with ICANN and the Children's Authority. You also spoke about the upcoming activities this week in Portmore here.
On Friday.
As well as with the schools. What else is there in train for the 16 days of activism?
All right. Part of the 16 days of activism, the police academy would have been running courses on gender responsive policing, and that has been ongoing for a couple of years now, where at the academy we are training all police officers throughout Trinidad and Tobago. There are 6 regions, region 1 to 6. I'm one of the lecturers at the academy, and we seek to talk to officers who are just coming on board as police officers, as well as those who are in the police service, on how to respond to gender based violence and domestic violence. So, and each region has different activities. So in Trinidad currently they have different symposiums and different activities to engage the public in awareness. Of course, this is one where we come on the various television stations and radio stations to talk about the issue of gender-based violence and domestic violence.
All right. I know I said that was the final thing, but I just want to ask one more question concerning gender-based violence. We spoke about whether the increase or decrease in incest, also in terms of statutory rape and that kind of thing. And you spoke earlier about the increase in domestic violence during COVID. Have you all seen a decrease in that since we've opened up, or has the trend continued?
The trend has somewhat continued, but again, with the various where we are going out and sensitizing the public, of course, when you go out and sensitize, reports will come in. There will be an increase because people know about something.
Yes.
All right, and as a result of us acting on that information, we are able to arrest and charge and take people before the court. So, I mean, remember, crime is on that person who chooses that particular action. All right, what we can do, we are not being just reactive, but we are also being proactive in every initiative that our department engages in to sensitize people about the law and what it says. So yes, we will see, there are times when we will see a spike, and there are times when we will not see any. And that's just based on people's ability to report as well as our ability to act.
All right, well, we want to thank WPC Esmerald Corbin of the TTPS, of the Special Victims Department in the TTPS. I want to thank you for coming in and talking about the 16 days of activism and really fielding our questions concerning the various types of violence towards special victims. And we wish you the best of success in your 16 days of activism. And we wish your department the best of success in reducing these types of crimes so that we can have a better society right here in Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago by extension. Viewers, we have to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll continue our conversations. So do us a favor. Share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back after these messages.